welcome to another 7-minute 7-point deck tech. I'm Drew Carter and here with another one of Drew's Brews. This one is called Blue Dune, which is a bit of a riff on Blue Moon. I set out to build a lock or prison deck, but instead of using Blood Moon, using things like Smokestacks, Chalice of the Void, Tanglewire, and even Crucible of the World's Recurring Wasteland, things like that. And the snow-covered plains at the time looked like a dune, so I went Blue Dune, although I'm off snow-covered now. One of the few decks that you don't have to play snow-covered lands. So the only other lock or prison deck I was aware of in 7-point Highlander was Philip Nicholson's That's So Raven's Crimes, kind of a pox deck or a green-black based lands deck that kind of locks out the opponent. I set out to build this deck as a bit of a challenge to see if I could build a good prison and lock deck, and it's actually very difficult in 7-point Highlander because it's hard to control both spells on the one hand and creatures on the other. Richard Shay wrote a really brilliant article about how Xerox strategies are fundamentally strong in Magic, perhaps the best way to build decks, because they use cantrips to provide selection, which provides consistency throughout the game, allows you to run fewer lands and helps in both the early and the late game in terms of finding what you need. So how do you beat Xerox decks, like decks that abuse Preordained, Ponder, Brainstorm, things like that? Well, you play Chalice of the Void or Severe Resistance to make those cards weak, or at least far less efficient, and you kind of pressure their mana so that the lower land count is a liability rather than an asset. So that was a strategy I took. I tried to build a main deck around that. The problem is people just cast Hex Drinker, Tarmogoyf, Questing Beast, things like that, these mid-range threats that just bash you. And Severe Resistance is actually counterproductive. When they go Tarmogoyf and you go Severe Resistance, you just make it harder to fight. So I've relegated the tax Xerox strategy to the sideboard here because we're currently in a mid-range meta where you've got to deal with those threats. So how do you deal with those threats? Well, you can combo out, or you can just go right over the top. And so one iteration of this deck has Expedition Map, Golos, Ivugan, and Emrakul, the Promised Land, to just go way over the top of your mid-range opponent. Sometimes that's a little clunky though, so I've cut that because there are new cards that help you out. Alright, so enough of the sideboard, let's look at the main deck. So this is fundamentally a blue-white prison deck, okay? And it's a bit like Death and Taxes, and then it's got a combination of like disruptive creatures, okay? Just disruption and creatures. But I'm trying to go a bit bigger so I can make sure I can go over Titania and things like that. Okay, so, and I'm running so that I can transform into Taxxeros post sideboard against combo control. I've got to play the lock pieces main deck that are at least not bad against mid-range decks. It's things like Sorcerer's Spyglass, still good against mid-range, still fine. So let's look by curve. The curve is quite funny. Okay, so I don't have many 1-drops because I want to try and attack 1-drops at least post sideboard. So I'm all 2s and 3s mainly, with a few 4s and payoff spells up the top. Okay, my points are Tinker. I really like Tinker for Sundering Titan because it's brilliant on both plans. It really disrupts your opponent's mana and the tax Xerox strategy, but it's also big enough to beat ramp. So I've got Tinker, Mystical Tutor to find the Tinker, that's 4. Mana Crypt to help power out the Tinker and other spells, and Mishra's Workshop to help power out Batterskull and other just artifacts in a fair way. Okay, so here are my 2-drops. I've got a combination of a bit of selection, which is important in ramp if you can play it, bit of mana to help get what I need, and some disruptive critters that are good post board as well. And then 3-drops are increasingly where it's at in Highlander, so be careful not to have too many because you'll get glutted. But these new disruptive beaters like Archon of Amira and Hullbringer are really valuable to this deck. And these Planeswalkers actually, well, Dovin's actually quite good as well because he defends your life total against the creature-based decks, but also disrupts the mana of the spell-based decks. The new Monarch card in full of favor alongside Palace Jailer. This is a new experiment I'm going with over the aforementioned kind of Emrakul approach. It's risky because there's a lot of creatures that can get the Monarch back off of you, but the Monarch mechanic is so powerful I think it's worth experimenting with. So I'm trying it at the moment. I'm not playing Swords and Path because I really just want threats instead. I just had Myriad Construct and Solemn Simulacrum instead, or just to further my game plan. And it kind of interferes with their creatures anyway, and if they don't have creatures, it's more proactive. The modal lands in Glasspool Mimic and Amiria's Call are really great in this deck. Amiria's Call provides you with a payoff spell at 7 mana, and as well as a land. And Glasspool Mimic doubles down on whichever strategy you're taking, whether that's tax Xerox, you can copy Glow Rider, or whether it's ramp, you can copy Myriad Construct or Sundering Titan. Antiquities War is just a fantastic way to go over the top in this any artifact based strategy as well. Battle Spell is just there as a payoff spell, but you need life gain to help buy time. Life gain's kind of ramp because it gets you into stage 3, it gets you into the late game in a different way, just in a natural way by hitting your land drops. This is your second Tinker target in Godfrey Statue. It's really powerful if you can also hit them with Sundering Titan, just like Trinisphere as well. You can just lock them under this this effect. And there's the Sundering Titan. Tinker Sundering Titan, half the games I win with that, so it's really good. Okay, here's your land base, a bit of big mana, a bit of utility and mana disruption. And the mana's fairly reliable, it's fairly good. You've got enough basics to get by. Another difficult thing with 5 color stacks or AE Eldrazi, things other also building, is back to basics is quite a beating. So this deck, I made sure this deck can fight through that decently. Here's your sideboard. Confounding Conundrum is another cool lock piece that you can try. So this deck has enables you to play a lot of recent printings in a fun way. Sanctum Prelate is a very powerful card. I haven't played it before, but it's quite undercosted for what you get compared to Chalice of the Void, which is also great. Pressure Field Cataclysm is absolutely massive, especially when you got the Mystical Tutor for it, and you can Mystical Tutor for Amiria's Call if you're desperate for a land drop. Cataclysm is absolutely huge. As long as you're not behind on board in a particular way, Cataclysm is usually just game winning, because especially if you can have a sphere effect standing by, or ideally the Godfrey Statue. Maybe they're not casting any more spells that game. It's absolutely brutal. It's extremely powerful, like Balance. Smokestack is the namesake of the Stacks decks of old, which are good when your opponents don't have too many permanents like control decks and so on. So that's Blue Dune. Have fun either locking your opponent out or going over the top, depending on the matchup. Have fun using a transformational sideboard, which is not common in Highlander, really. And have fun trying to pursue Lock, which is a very underrepresented archetype